I'll be using digitize to digitize this diagram of the fish. I'll be creating a toolpath for a CNC cut. First thing I do here in digitize is define my four corners by selecting 4 points. Shown here, I'm selecting those 4 points on the diagram. This will define my workspace. Here I've selected tracing as my method of digitizing. I'm going to trace out the perimeter of the fish. You'll see here where I'm using a blue pencil to mark off where I've started to do my tracing. Also, the diagram's got some red marks on it because I had traced it once before, so this is my second time around. Because the fish parts are so irregular, I'll be using the trace command quite a bit, except for those 2 circles. I'll be using the circle command. The circle command on digitize is easy. You just touch 3 spots on the circle. The program echoes back the diameter. You either accept it or input what you'd like to change it to. What you'll see here next is I've completed the perimeter tracing, and now I'm doing the internal parts, starting at that small section around the tail. So I use the blue pencil to mark off where I start. And again, the importance of keeping track of where you started is when I come back around, I don't want to have a cross vector. So if you over trace, that's going to cause a cross vector. And that cross vector will cause trouble with the CNC toolpath. The other thing I do here is I save my work frequently, so I'll just stop my tracing and create a file. What I want to accomplish here is to create a DXF file of the fish. And then I want to run that file through Vectric Aspire 11.5, create a toolpath to machine out the fish. And I'd like this fish to look sort of three-dimensional by machining out some of those parts. This is a good sized project because the wood piece I'm using is about 30 inches long, it's about 11 inches wide in the rough, and it's about 1 inch thick. I dressed it down to about 7/8, I think it's about 10 3/4 wide. I'm also using butternut, which I really like that wood. It's kind of a dark wood. It almost looks like a walnut, but it's not. It's softer than walnut, but it's really nice for carving, really nice for CNC machining. digitize has a unique feature that you can move the display contents to another device, like a cell phone or an iPad. So in other words, you can move your control screen on the left side to another device and have it really close to where you're doing your tracing. Also, it's good to mention that when you save your work, the program saves 2 copies. It saves the copy that you've selected, and it saves a working copy. What's nice about that is that you could take a break or say continue tracing the next day, and you load in that work copy and just continue on tracing. You might notice here on the screen that you can go through the setup and you can make that tracing black or red or whatever color you want, and also you can make the line very fine. So I've selected 0.5 because I like that tracing to look like a black thread. Under the Options and Setup buttons, that's how you configure the program to whatever you'd like to have it set up to suit yourself. I'll be using a red paint on the parts where the CNC will hog those areas out, remove the wood. And to stop that red paint from seeping into the wood, you apply a sealer first. So you apply the sealer, paint your red parts red, and then sand it off. You end up sanding it right down to the bare wood. After all that, after the paint's been applied, after you've sanded right down to the bare wood, then I'll reseal it and I'll give it about 4 coats of clear lacquer, because the butternut has such grain that the clear lacquer it'll just look beautiful. I'm getting to the point where I'm finished all the tracing, so I'm going to go ahead now and save my work. Here I've loaded the file into Aspire 11.5. I'll check the vector quality, run it through the simulator, and create the toolpath for the CNC. Here I've got the butternut piece mounted on the slave board of the CNC. You'll see that I use wood hold downs to hold my piece down on the slave board, and that's because if the router hits the hold downs, they're wood, so it won't do any harm to the carbide bit. First part of the toolpath here is to hog out some of that material. I'm using a 1/4 inch carbide end mill. I'm running the router about 19,000 RPM and about 40 inches per minute feed rate, but I can manually adjust that feed rate as I see how it's cutting. If it's cutting smooth, I'll ramp up the speed. If it's cutting rough, I'll back the speed off. Here I've selected a different toolpath and I'm using a carbide V-bit. It's a 60°. That'll round over some of those sharp edges, make it look like it's carved. If you're wondering why I don't use dust pickup, it's because I like to show the bit cutting, but I do have a dust pickup. With the dust pickup, you can't see the bit because there's a shroud goes right around. You'll notice here that the butternut had a couple of knots there right at the front end. I tried to position the fish to see if I could catch one of those knots right at the fish eye. I was pretty close. It looks good. You'll see when I'm finished. I programmed that V-bit to cut down about a 1/2 inch deep. I want that depth because I want this to have a 3-dimensional look when it's finished. Now I'm running the last toolpath. This is the toolpath that'll just have the 1/4 inch end mill. I'm going to cut out the perimeter of the fish. I've also set up tabs around the fish area to keep the piece in the workpiece. I don't want that fish to get loose when it gets cut out. You can see here clearly where I tried to put that knot on the fish eye. On here I've given it one coat of sealer so I can apply a red paint to the parts that I've machined out. I sanded off the excess red paint, and now I'm ready to apply my first finish, sand that, and then apply the final 2 coats of lacquer. The black looks good. I like the fish.